One of the first tools of American freedom really was the French Charleville musket. Now, these guns started about 1717 and served until after the Napoleonic War. But when it comes to an American gun, Charleville, it counts.
You know, most people, when they think of a muzzle-loading musket of the 19th century European, they think of the British Brown Bess. However, the French produced some superb military long arms. Two good examples being the models 1763 and 1766, which were widely used by the Americans in the American Revolution, as well as the model 1777, which were carried by the French that were sent over to assist the Americans during the Revolution.
So the Charleville musket was a standard infantry long arm of the French military from 1717 until shortly after the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. The total number made were about 7 million, with 2 million of that 7 million having been what they call Year 9 correction guns. The 1777 model, corrected in the year 1800 or Year 9, that was basically made under the direction of the first consul, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Bonaparte decides that it's time to update French ordnance. Things have gotten a little sloppy. A lot of guns have been worn out, destroyed, lost. There's been a lot of turmoil since 1789. Now, the French changed a couple of things on the model 1777. They reoriented the flash pan slightly on this just to give it a little bit better geometry. They simplified the hammer, or the cock is what it's properly called. They removed a spring holding the upper barrel band in place that was something that often got lost. They repositioned the ramrod spring to make the ramrod a little easier to return. By and large, pretty minor changes, but enough to be notable in terms of the overall evolution of French arms design. We call them Charlevilles because that's where a lot of early French muskets were made, but they weren't made just at Charleville. These were made at French arsenals at Maubeuge and Mutzig and Etienne and Tulle. And so when we say Charleville, we're describing an entire class of arms made at a range of manufactories across France. But the name Charleville stuck because of our experience with these guns in the American Revolution.
It's interesting in that it was manufactured to such close tolerances that it was one of the first, if not the first, military long arm that actually enjoyed the ability to have the parts interchanged, one to the other. A very, very, very fine gun. The caliber was about 17.5, which is roughly 68 caliber. The windage of the gun was very, very tight. They weren't really worried too much about the actual repeated loading. The main concern of Gribeauval was that the bullets be seated firmly when they were loaded, so that as the gun was knocked about, it did not become, loosened.
It was a three-banded musket in 69 caliber, which differed from its main competitor, the Brown Bess, which had been in service for nearly the exact same period of time as the Charleville had. The Brown Bess had also undergone a number of revisions, long land pattern, short land pattern. For the most part, it stayed a pinned barreled musket of 75 caliber, while the Charleville was a banded barreled 69 caliber. So the weight of the ball allowed it a little bit of further range than the Brown Bess, and a little bit better penetration than the English 75 caliber that it went up against on so many American and European battlefields of the late 18th and early 19th centuries.
So interestingly enough, the gun didn't really have sights. They didn't think they needed them at this point in military firearms development. It had a nub up on the front barrel band that could be used for aiming, but that's not really how these guns were intended to be used. Later on, you'd have voltigeurs and skirmishers and that sort of thing. But really, these muskets were intended for mass fire from large formations of infantry. And so they're meant to be fired, again, muzzle loading, about 3 shots a minute if the soldier was well trained, sometimes less. And it's the volume of fire created by those masses of infantry that is how wars are fought up until we get to the era of the American Civil War and rifled arms.